Today we're going to do a garden tour and I'll show you the different type of squash, namely winter squash that I'm growing this year in my garden. I did grow summer squash too, which is a zucchini type of squash, but today it's going to be about the winter squash. I'll show you the different types and when I harvest them to be able to store them up successfully for the winter months. First we have the sucrine dewberry squash, and this is more like a butternut type shape squash. It's my first time growing it. I've never tasted it before, so I can't speak much on it, but I would absolutely be growing this again. It's a really nice size. And here we have the early butternut squash, really nice size also, coming into maturity. And this I grow every year. Next up we have the New England sugar pie pumpkin, and this is more of a dessert type pumpkin. Nice size. Then here we have the Boer flat white pumpkin. A very big pumpkin, I should say. I have grown it before over the years. And then we have the North Georgia candy roaster. I've showed this in one of my videos before, and like I said, it's the first time I am growing it. Then we have this Jamaican pumpkin right here. I'm excited about this one. It's the first time I'm growing this variety. And then we have a Big Max right here. So I'm growing lots and lots of different varieties of pumpkins because they can store up without refrigeration or having to preserve it. Then over here we have this pumpkin that my sister sent me. These seeds are right from the island of Spice, which is Grenada, my home country. Then next up we have the moringa squash, really nice size. And the reason why it's kind of on its stem is because right there, as you can see, that little white part, that's actually a root that is sent out and it's rooted in the ground. So it's getting nutrients from the ground through that root system. And so I just place those two little green stands under it so it could be protected from being directly on the ground where the bugs can dig into it and start feeding on it. Then next up over here I have this spaghetti squash, and for some reason this squash has been here just as with the other ones I've shown you, and it's just, you know, struggling. It took so long to put flowers out. As you can see, I just showed you a tiny one on it, and there's another one somewhere over here at the end. The vine looks perfectly fine. It's nice and green. There is no vine borer issues, and it's just spreading like crazy and growing really nicely. And my hope was to have produce enough that we can have some to eat and still store for the winter months. And if that's not the case, we'll just enjoy it in our meals, and next year we'll be growing again. And over here are my acorn squash. The vine is still growing. I did prune it back early in the season, and it's a prolific bear, as you can see. So we're gonna have a lot to store up. There's sufficient time for these acorn squash to fully mature. So we're gonna be having squash to store up for the winter months. We're also gonna be getting seeds because the seeds are actually gonna be mature enough and viable for planting in the future. But if you look over here, the color on these squash, look at that. It's not quite ready. And if you want to know when these are ready for harvesting, you just look under. And if it doesn't have that bright yellow spot at the bottom, then you know for sure that it's not ready to be harvested. Let's see if there's any yellowing as yet. Probably, let's check this one right here. As you can see, it started to get a little bit lighter at the bottom here, but it's not fully matured yet. If you want to cook it and eat it, that's totally fine. But let it go all the way to maturity if you want to store it up and you want the seeds to be viable for planting in the future. Now over here I have this other squash. The vine looks beautiful. It's a moringa squash again. And this is just to show you that everything doesn't go as planned in the garden, and no matter what you do sometimes, look at that. The chickens are just going to get a treat, but I'll just leave it on the vine. This was also a late bearer that produced very few flowers. So the chickens are going to be happy with that one when I do harvest it. And sometimes it may look like this, but the seeds might be viable, so we'll wait and see what happens to that. And over here, there's another little one popping out of the vine, and it's sending out smaller fruits on the vine. So we'll see what happens with the growing time we have left in this season. Now over here, I have another acorn squash, and because of the location it's planted in, right here, it has not grown a whole lot, and it's only put one squash out on the vine. So I do plant the same thing in different locations. Sometimes it's because where I have the room to grow it, and sometimes it's just to see what it's going to do and what condition it prefers. And then, of course, I am growing another one of my sister's Grenadian pumpkin. And look at the vine, how really good it looks. It's running and running everywhere, but it has no fruit on it. And that's because it's in an area where there is hardly any sunlight. So it took a longer time to grow the flower, and of course it sends out the male flowers first, so now there's no female flowers on it as yet, fingers crossed. Now, to know if a squash or a winter pumpkin is ready for harvesting, you gotta make sure that it pretty much have a uniform color. Any green you see on your butternut squash indicates that it's not fully matured, especially if you want to store it up over the winter months. I also make certain that this tendril is dried out first. Most of the time what I do is I allow the vine to dry down all the way, get nice and brown and crisp. And that's if you want to store it up. This is perfectly fine to eat right now. You can cook it and eat it. But if you want to store it up, let that tendril dry. Allow the skin to go or rind to go all the way to maturity. If you stick your fingernail in it to do the test, you want to make sure that your fingernail does not go through the skin. So this is the 10 varieties of winter squash that I'm growing this season. And I am going to be storing up as much as I can to last us over the winter months.